Story time about how I came out as gay to my husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm 27 years old, and when I was in high school, I knew that I like girls. In fact, I pretty much only dated girls throughout all of my high school. I did also date guys. My parents were totally accepting of this, by the way. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to marry a man so that I could have kids. When I got into college, I started dating this girl. Her and I dated for a couple of weeks, and she introduced me to my now husband. So he and I started hooking up behind her back, and she eventually found out and she broke up with me. Fast forward a few years later, and we're married. But here's the problem. I found myself only being attracted to women, and I was definitely not attracted to my husband. Obviously, this became a huge problem in the relationship. So guess what my husband did? He hired an escort to come spend some time with us, if you know what I mean. This was great, but I basically only wanted to be with the escort, not my husband. A few weeks later, the escort and I actually started dating. So bad, I know. My husband had no idea. And this escort actually asked me to be her girlfriend part 2 as a... So the escort and I started dating behind my husband's back. Like, her and I were in a full-blown relationship. Mind you, I'm a woman. Mind you, my husband doesn't know that I like women only. This went on for a few months. I was living a total lie. My husband would go to work. Since I worked from home, I would go to my escort girlfriend's apartment and spend the day with her. I even took a toothbrush and some clothes. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to go watch a movie. We're standing in line to buy popcorn, and of course we're kissing and holding hands. This is when one of my husband's employees comes up to me, taps my shoulder and says hi. But she acted like she didn't see anything. Like she was just coming up to me and saying hi. I could tell that something was off. I mean, she saw me kissing this girl. That's when the guilt started getting to me. I could no longer lie to my husband. I knew I had to come out to him. That same night, I talked to my husband. I confessed everything and told him that I really liked women only. That's when he tells me that he knew about the relationship this whole time. That he knew I only liked women. Part 3 is up. My husband tells me that he knew I was having an affair this whole time. That he also knew that I only liked women. That's when my husband tells me that it's okay, because he can deal with me having this affair. Because he didn't want anyone to know that he was married to someone that liked women. He told me he'd rather stay married, have kids with me, and basically live a lie. I also forgot to mention, my husband's a really wealthy guy. He offered me a lot of money to stay with him and have kids. Last week, I got a letter from his lawyer. It was a contract basically saying that if I stay with him and have his kids, he'll pay me a very large amount of money. But here's the thing. I've fallen in love with my escort girlfriend. She thinks I'm going to divorce my husband to be with her. My husband thinks that I'm going to sign this contract and have his kids. Even my mother-in-law is getting involved. She's begging me to sign the contract and have the kids. Never thought I'd have to choose between love and money. A few days ago, my escort girlfriend actually asked me to move in with her. I told my husband, he said no. What should I do? Story time about how I found out I had a stalker. This gets really scary, so let's start. I was living by myself in 2016 in Los Angeles. I was working a lot in commercials and modeling and doing a bunch of stuff, and I had my own little studio apartment on Melrose Avenue. It was super cute, and I loved it. I felt very safe. 2 months into the lease, I booked some acting work, so I had to be on set for 3 days in a row, and I stayed in a hotel while I was on set, so I actually didn't get to go home. When I finally got home, I noticed that my fridge had moved about 2 feet to the right, which is very noticeable because that's a large space to cover, and I noticed that my fridge was just in a different place. So I called the landlord and asked her if they had to come into my apartment for some reason, and she said no. I didn't want to freak out, so I just tried to ignore it, and I thought, no one's coming into my apartment. That would be insane. For the next couple of days, I kept trying to justify how my fridge would move. I even thought that my apartment was probably being haunted by a ghost, until one day after an audition, I come home and I find that. So I come home and I notice that my fridge has moved again, and I know this because I put it back and it was moved another 2 tiles, which is about 2 feet. So I quickly call the landlord and I say to her, can you please check any cameras if you guys have any? And lo and behold, she said, yes, we do have security cameras. Let's check right now. Come over to my place. So I run over to her apartment. She starts pulling up footage from that same day, but it's taking very long. And I ask her to actually check footage from the past few weeks so that I can see if anyone had been in my apartment the first time. So she pulls up the camera pointing to my hallway, but unfortunately the quality was so blurry and my door was just outside of the scope of the lens. Either way, I could still get kind of a glimpse. So she fast forwards through a few hours and finally I see a shadow. I tell her to stop and rewind and slow it down. And what I see literally made me poo my pants. Someone in a green shirt was right outside of my door and you could barely see their shoulder. At the corner of the screen, I see there's a green shirt and it's like the shoulder of someone and it seems like they just disappeared into the door. Of course, I instantly started to freak out. Can you guys imagine seeing that? I was hyperventilating. I started to cry and she was trying to calm me down. Just to be safe, she called the owner of the building and asked if they had sent a repairman. They said no. Of Of course, I called the police. They said if there was no immediate physical danger, they couldn't come. So they didn't. Of course, I installed cameras. I had an app so that I could check everything remotely whenever I was out of my apartment, and I never saw anything. After that, I would put the coffee table and a dresser in front of the door so that I could make sure nobody would come in while I was sleeping. I was very paranoid the whole time. I would cry every single day. To this day, I still don't know who it was. I don't know if they took anything. I don't know if they put anything in. I think after that time, they did not come back in, but obviously I did move out a month later. It was very scary. I started taking kickboxing, and I still take it to this day. I think self-defense is super important, especially if you live by yourself. Continuation of the story time I posted about my celebrity ex. He was abusive and he was named in the comments by someone. I did confirm who it was, so if you guys are curious, please go back to that story time. It's my celebrity story time about my celebrity ex or something like that, so go back to that story time so you can see the comments and learn who it is. So a lot of you guys are curious about how we met, so here we go. I was working at the strip club as a cocktail waitress. He came in one night and it was like lust at first sight. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that before, but it's a really powerful thing. So he stayed at the bar the whole night and was really aggressive about getting my phone number. First red flag. Didn't even realize it. Honestly, I just thought he was super charming. So the very next day, he's already texting me, asking me if I want to go to have breakfast. I kept saying no, and for about a week, he was chasing me, and I swear to God, he loved the chase. And I eventually said yes. We went to dinner, and it was a really nice, fancy dinner. And he was very aggressive, wanting to kiss me and stuff, and I let him. Part 2, so the dinner was really romantic, it was really fancy, and he tried to kiss me, and I kind of pulled away, but he was really respectful, and then it just kind of snowballed. We had another date, and it was really nice, and then we had another date, and then on that third date, I went over to his house, and at the time, I was 20 years old. I was like a baby and I was super nervous. I was like, I'm in a strange man's house. Like, what am I doing here? And then he kissed me and it was like magical. It was just the most amazing thing ever. And this man just had this like power over me when it came to stuff like that. He was really romantic and I had never experienced anything like that being so young. So anyway, weeks pass and everything is wonderful. He's an amazing guy. And he even starts talking about marriage, and it's only been about a month into the relationship. 1 month and he's already talking about marriage. So he basically asked me to marry him and I said yes. Part 3, so at this point we're really happy. We're talking about marriage. So one day I go to Trader Joe's to buy everything I need for dinner, and he calls me when I'm there and he says, look, I need to tell you something. I have a substance abuse problem, and this is basically, you're out. If you don't want to be in this relationship for that reason, you need to tell me now. And I said to him, absolutely not. I want to help you, because I was so naive. I thought I could actually help him. And I honestly thought he was telling me this because he wanted to change and he wanted to go to rehab. But no, he was only letting me know so that I could know what to expect from then on, because the relationship was never the same after that. Unfortunately, literally that day, he was not the same person anymore. It was the most bizarre thing ever. But from then on, he would put him and I in situations like where we were literally on the verge of getting caught by cops or, traveling somewhere, and he was carrying stuff. He was always accusing me of stuff. He was always accusing me of something, and it took him hitting me to leave. Story time of when I got sexually assaulted at the strip club I worked at. Now, I have many story times because I worked as a cocktail waitress, model, and actress in Los Angeles for a long time. So I have many stories of people who decided to try to take advantage of me. So I want to share them with you guys. In my last story time, so many people started opening up in the comments about their own experiences. So here we go. In 2011, I got hired as a cocktail waitress at this strip club called Deja Vu. I lived in Valley Village, and the strip club was in the Valley, so it was about a mile away from me. It was the perfect situation. I loved it. It was a fun environment. I got along with everyone. But 2 months in, there was always this man that used to come in with his friends, and he had a dedicated cocktail waitress, so I never got the chance to serve him. But one day she showed up late, so I decided to go serve him myself. And when I went to his table, he was nice, didn't say much, but everyone knew of this guy as a really powerful rich guy. Right away, he gave me $100 and told me to sit down next to him. So I did. I sat down, I took their order, and then he asked me my name, I tell him, and then he tells me to go get the drinks. But before I leave, he gives me another $100. So at this point, he's given me $200. And I didn't realize that what he was trying to do was groom me. He was preparing me for what was to come. In other words, he had paid me, now he could do whatever he wanted. So I go get the drinks, I come back to the table, and he asked me to sit again. By the way, his friends are still at the table, right there in front of us. And I sit down, he starts asking me a bunch of questions. I feel uncomfortable, so I start getting up to leave. And then he grabs me by the shoulders and sticks his tongue down my throat. And if that wasn't disgusting enough, he grabs my you-know-what down there and starts fondling me. If you've never been handled like this, you guys, it's a extremely shocking experience to be handled like that. Like, for a second, you're just like, what's happening? What do I do? All I did or all I could do, was push him away. And once I got free of his hold, he looks at me in shock and says, "What are you doing? I paid you." So I literally ran away from the table. I can hear his friends laughing, cackling at me like this was such an entertaining part of their night. And the guy was just yelling at me, asking me to come back to him. I didn't. I ran away. My knees were buckling. I was sweating, and I ran straight to the security guard who usually had my back. I told him what happened, and he's like, "Hey, look, we can't tell this guy to leave because the club is scared of him because he's a drug runner. He's a well-known drug runner." So I ran over to the back room. I happened to come across the server who usually serves him, and I tell her what happened, and she was just like, "Oh, don't worry, he's just like that, and he usually gives me $2,000 a night. You should have stayed." I was in shock, like complete shock. I went home. I cried for frickin' days. I didn't go back to the club, and when I finally did, 2 weeks later, I met my abusive ex.